First off, thanks, William, for a really graceful video. I know a lot of times these things can get into shouting matches and name calling and stuff like that, and so I'm posting this on my more minor channel that doesn't have quite as many viewers and stuff like that. And if it generates those kind of comments, I'll probably just disable comments because that's not what your video was about, and that's not what my video is going to be about. So I'm going to try to keep away from just making a video quoting statistics because those are boring videos and statistics can be manipulated. So I'll try to limit it to just a very few significant ones, but no promises. So first off, let me start with a different subject just to kind of give you a mindset. I think that's what you're more looking for, is the mindset of people that are part of the gun culture in America, more than statistics and things like that. So when I started out as a teenager, I was a hot rodder. I belonged to a group of kids that we like to take muscle cars with big, huge engines and hot rod them up so they would go fast, and basically take all of our extra paychecks that we would get from our part-time jobs and just put them into the cars. So that was what it was about. But I didn't understand anything about motorcycles. As a matter of fact, coming from a hot rodder standpoint, I thought motorcyclists were crazy. I thought motorcycles were unsafe themselves. I thought they were unstable. I don't know how these people would drive around without falling down. I thought they basically just attracted biker gangs and criminal types and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was kind of my impression of what motorcycling was all about at the time. But I also had a buddy in high school that kept bugging me all through high school. Let's get motorcycles together. Let's get motorcycles together. And more or less just to shut him up, I went out and bought a motorcycle, and I figured, I'll try it, and then just probably, you know, I didn't think it was going to be horrible, but I thought maybe I'd ride for a year and then probably get rid of the motorcycle. Well, I ended up falling in love with motorcycles because I started understanding more about what the motorcycle was about and what the culture was about. Now, I'm not saying statistically the motorcycles are not dangerous at all. In fact, if you look at statistics, it's about 20 times more. Now, some people say 30, but the most conservative, by I think it's IDOT, Department of Transport, the Department, just DOT, I think it is Department of Transportation, the federal version. Their most conservative estimate is you're 20 times more likely to get hurt or killed on a motorcycle than you are in a car. But yet, those statistics, like you said too, the statistics on violent crime are not the exact same as the violent statistics in the United States of what violent crime is. Well, the same with motorcycles. The first 2 years, most people riding a motorcycle are very dangerous. They hurt themselves, they hurt other people. In fact, when I teach motorcycles, I never tell anybody, I tell them specifically, do not carry any passengers with you the first 2 years you're riding. Don't endanger anybody else. But once you get past that 2 years, and especially if you have somebody more mature and more careful, it's actually not really that much more unsafe than a car. And maybe you could maybe argue that it is a little bit, but if you have more mature riders that make good decisions, are careful, are not in it to, do anything crazy, just ride your motorcycle carefully and enjoy the scenery, get some experience and stuff like that, I'd say it's maybe just slightly more than dangerous as a car. So that's what I would say about that. So what I want to give you a sense of is when you don't understand about something and you're not around it, you don't necessarily look at it the same way. So my fear and I don't know, bad attitude towards motorcycles was based on not knowing anything about it. So I think in your case, and you even talked about it too, you don't come from a gun culture, you weren't around guns, you haven't grown up with guns. I mean, that's part of my living in the Midwest. I mean, just as an ordinary American kid growing up in the Midwest, your dad takes you out, shows you how to use a gun. You go hunting with your dad. And as part of Boy Scouts, even, we had target shooting. I was on the rifle team for the Boy Scouts. So that's just a part of growing up. So um, that's just, we're always around it. It's just a tool. But let me get back on the rights issue of it too. I want to talk a little bit about the rights issue, and because it is a constitutional right in the United States versus in England, you don't have any particular constitutional right or right under law to carry a firearm. Now, let me do a comparison with that too. You've probably heard about the riots that we had in Ferguson, where it went out of control. People were burning buildings down. I mean, people were hurt. In fact, I think on the second day, if I remember right, it's in a side alley. I think two people were actually shot. I don't know if any of them died or not, but I think they might have been killed. I think there might have been two people as a result of this protest. It kind of got out of shape and went crazy and stuff like that. But I got to look at it now. Technically, would we be safer if we didn't allow people to protest and took away that right? Yeah, yeah, we would be safer actually. We would be safer if we got rid of the right of people to protest. But do I want to pay that price? Do I want to give up my right to protest? And I'm not saying in my case, there's probably the odds are probably 1,000,000 to 1 that I would ever go on one of those protests or do a march in downtown Chicago or something like that. But I still want the right to be able to do it. Even if I don't tend to do it. For example, in Illinois, they finally passed. Illinois was the last state that kept trying to fight the Constitution, and the Supreme Court said no, you have to allow your citizens to carry. So I could, if I went through the procedure, got the permit, I could carry a gun wherever I went. But um, I just choose not to do it. But I want that right to be able to do it if I should choose. I also want the right to not have to vote if I don't want to. I like the right that I can vote. I like the right that I don't have to do it if I don't want to. But I want that right to always be there if I want to use it. So yeah, and the odds are, I will admit to, and if you look at the odds of me carrying a gun, never even having to use it, or ever even just walking around, even as close as I am to Chicago, and I'm just the other side of O'Hare Airport, one of the biggest airports in the world. Ranks I think in the top 10. It's usually the first or second or third most busiest in the United States. What are my chances that I'd be involved in anything to do with the gun and violence and stuff like that? It's actually very small. You talk about there was a news outlet in the UK. I forget what it is. I think I know what it is, but I don't remember the name. But you said they were kind of like more like a drama news service, and we have that in the United States. It's full of drama and stuff like that. So basically, what I'm trying to say is the news media blows things out of proportion. You would think by the news media that there is just shootouts in the Old West and shootouts in the OK Corral going on, all the time in the United States. And Chicago is like, same thing as Al Capone with just people running around and blasting with guns and stuff. It's not quite that way. That's more the drama from. I hope I don't have to pause this video, but the dog's gone crazy. Hold on a second. I'm going to have to pause this. Okay, hopefully I got that straightened out for a while and I'm back again. So anyway, we're talking about the news media and the drama and stuff like that. It happens just as much here too. That's why I actually got rid of cable and just shut it off, because the news media gives you guys a total wild look at Americans that's nothing like reality. We get kind of the same thing too about from the UK. We have stereotypes about you guys, and I'm sure they're quite a lot less than accurate. So but if you look at the statistics, everything in life I judge risk versus reward. And to be scared of something or really be concerned about something, to me, it'd have to be something that's more dangerous than just ordinary stuff I face every day. I drive a car, I drive a motorcycle. My likelihood, actually, the three things that are going to kill me most likely is going to be a car crash. That's the number one. Well, I don't think it's the number one, but it's one of the top three, I think. And the other is a fall, dying from a fall, and the other is dying from a heart attack. So, and I think there's even 4 or 5 more of those two just common ways that you can die. So when people bring up these scare tactics of, like on Facebook especially, eating this food's going to kill you, or doing this sports activity is going to kill you. Well, I got to think of, is it more risky than dying in a car? You drive a cab all the time, so about, it's hard to even drive on the road for very long, if you're constantly on the road without getting in a few accidents. So it is dangerous, and maybe it's even the number one way in the UK that people die. I don't know, but the number one way that people die in the United States is in car crashes. So if something is quite a bit less dangerous that's going to hurt me than a car crash, then I've got to consider that, should I really live my life in fear and loathing of something like that? So in fact, I have a friend on Facebook, just a recent friend that I friended on Facebook, and she has a total irrational fear that someone is going to kill her. She's just constantly afraid that some crazy, and she sends me in these news articles of, look at this in this town, this guy was walking down the street and he was shot. And I keep asking her, do you really believe that it's more likely that you're going to be killed by a crazy person on the street than you're going to die in a car accident or die of other common causes? If you look at statistics, it's obvious. To me, it's total obvious. But since her fear is irrational, I can kind of understand that too. I have, for some reason, I've gotten a chance to swim in both oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, as I travel and stuff like that. But I get this really weird fear when I get in the ocean and stuff like that, especially when the water's fairly deep. It's like, I'm in the shark's home. They could come up and just totally gulp me down as just a little snack. But I also got to know statistically, what is there, like 40, 50 shark attacks in the entire world every year? So the chances a shark is going to come up, but it's still, I'm thinking, well, it still could possibly happen. So it gives me this creepy feeling, and I can't really do it for too long, and I have to either go back to the wading part of the ocean, the less deep part of the ocean, or just sit on the beach and enjoy the ocean that way, because it just gnaws at me, this crazy fear. But I realize it's an irrational fear. It's not statistically very likely at all that I'm going to get gulped down by a shark. It's possible, yes, and somebody will. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. Somebody will. But even since I used to be a cop, and I don't remember if I mentioned it before or anything like that. Some people know, some people don't. But I was a police officer for 8 years, and since I've retired, I've never carried a gun with me, except when I go hunting or go to a shooting range to shoot targets and stuff like that. I don't, as a matter of fact, just carry a gun around with me all the time, because statistically, the odds that I would ever need it, I mean, most police officers, you're never even involved in a shootout. The average police officer can work 20, 30 years and retire from the police force and never get involved in a shootout where he has to use his gun and shoot a bad guy. So even that is a very rare occurrence. I mean, on large departments, it will happen. If you have a department the size of downtown Chicago, sure, it's going to happen to certain officers because there's just so many of them. But the likelihood for the average police officer ever getting involved in a gunfight is very, very small. So just think about that compared to the average citizen, which is even less likely to get involved in a gunfight. So, and I also think it's just part of the Bill of Rights, and every right that we have there. I consider all of our rights sacred. I mean, I consider the freedom of speech sacred. I consider the freedom to not have the police come in and search my stuff, my freedom of privacy of my own stuff, to where the police can't just, bang the door down at 3 o'clock in the morning and come in and look at my stuff. All these rights to me are kind of sacrosanct, and shouldn't just be given up lightly. So, yeah, the fact that, sometimes the rights do infer certain dangers and stuff like that, but do I really want to get rid of any of my rights and everything like that, just to get maybe a little bit more perceived safety? And it might be just such a small amount that I would never even notice it, or the average person wouldn't even notice that. So yeah, we in our culture, we've decided that some trade-offs are really worth it, and in your culture, you've decided that the trade-offs are not necessarily worth it, and I respect that. That's your country's choice. When I'm in your country, I'm a guest and everything like that. I do notice, like you said about Steve, when my friends from Europe do tend to come to this country, especially to stay, they too do tend to want to buy a gun right away. I mean, and I don't think it's necessarily out of fear either. I think it's just because of the fact of, wait, I've never had a government that really trusted me with the responsibility. I'm a responsible person. I would like to own a gun, even if it's just for target shooting or just for hunting deer or something like that. So, yeah, I think that's about everything that I could possibly touch on as far as the gun culture and stuff like that. And yeah, maybe we'll never resolve, and the UK will never decide to be like us. But I think I give you a little more sense of where I'm coming from, and why I feel the way I do. And I think by using some of the comparisons, like what I thought about motorcycles, and then when I learned more about them and stuff like that, maybe it gave you a little idea of where I'm coming from in my mind. And I think maybe I can't even say that I represent every gun owner or all of the gun culture in the U.S. But I certainly am someone that owns quite a few guns and enjoys my guns for legal purposes and never wishes to hurt anybody. And I think the majority of gun owners and the majority in the gun culture would agree with that. They're not out to hurt anybody or anything like that. They're out to just be responsible and use their constitutional rights responsibly, just like when they vote, just like when they march and protest. So anyway, thank you again, William, for making such a calm and sincere video expressing your views as a person from the UK. And I will try to get this up as soon as I can.